What would you do if a police officer pointed a gun at you simply because of your skin color, even though you've served your country with honor? A high-ranking black female military officer just wanted to buy a few groceries, but instead, she was insulted and threatened in public. What no one expected was that this woman wasn't alone. One phone call and everything changed. Watch this shocking story where dignity, justice, and courage clash in a dramatic stand for what's right. If you enjoy powerful content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your current location. We'd love to know where in the world you're watching from. On a warm weekend afternoon, Rachel Taylor, a high-ranking military officer who had just finished a long tour of duty, decided to stop by a small supermarket near her home to buy some essentials. She did not wear her military uniform but chose a simple outfit, a white shirt, blue jeans, and sneakers. With such a simple appearance, no one could guess that she was one of the most outstanding military officers who had commanded hundreds of soldiers on the battlefield. Entering the supermarket, Rachel gently picked up her shopping cart and began to walk down the aisles. She enjoyed choosing everything herself, finding it a relaxing way to unwind after a stressful day at work. But just a few minutes later, an unusual situation caught her attention. At the end of the aisle, a man in a police uniform was shopping. Police Officer Brian Ford, tall, with short hair and a condescending demeanor, picked up a few items and carelessly dropped them on the floor. It was a pack of noodles and a bottle of soda rolling around in the middle of the crowded aisle. But instead of bending down to pick them up, he just glanced at them and turned away, completely ignoring them. Rachel paused, watching the scene with distaste. As a soldier, she was trained to pay attention to detail and maintain a high sense of responsibility. Brian's behavior was too much for her to ignore. Stepping closer, she spoke, her voice calm but clear. "Excuse me, sir. You just dropped something. Perhaps you should pick it up to avoid inconveniencing others." Brian turned his head, his eyes cold and arrogant. He looked at Rachel from head to toe, sizing her up as if she were an unknown person. With a disdainful expression, he curled his lips and said, "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? I don't have time to worry about such trivial matters." Rachel kept her cool. She wasn't used to being insulted, but she knew how to keep her emotions in check, especially in a situation like this. You're a police officer. You have a responsibility to set an example for the community. Picking up things is not only polite, it also shows respect for others. Rachel says words did not change Brian's attitude, but instead made him more upset. His voice became harsh. "You don't need to tell me how to live. Who are you to talk to me? What does a woman like you know about the responsibilities of a police officer?" These sexist and belittling remarks caused a few people around to turn and stare, but Brian didn't care. He continued, this time with a distinctly sarcastic tone. "Or are you just trying to act smart? I advise you to mind your own business before others laugh at you." Rachel took a deep breath. She didn't want to cause a fight, but Brian clearly wasn't one to stop. "I don't want to argue with you. But if you keep this up, you're going to get into trouble." Brian laughed out loud as if he had just heard a joke. "Trouble? What are you going to do? Call the supermarket manager? Or are you going to write a complaint letter to me? Listen, women like you should just keep quiet and stay away from big things. Don't make a fool of yourself." Brian's words became more and more insulting. Rachel could feel the eyes of the people around them. Some customers quietly took out their phones to record the scene. She took a step forward, looking straight at Brian. Her voice was calm but firm. "I advise you to think carefully before saying anything more. Not everyone is what they seem." Rachel's warning seemed to have no effect on Brian. Instead, he crossed his arms and looked at her with disdain. "Look, I don't care who you are or what rights you think you have. You're just a common black woman, and I don't take orders from people like you." Those words were the last straw. Rachel felt her anger rise, but she refused to let it control her. She knew this was more than just an argument, it was a test of her character and dignity. She looked at Brian, her eyes sharp, her voice stronger. "I tried to remind you politely, but if you continue to insult me like this, you will be held accountable before the law. And just so you know, I'm not someone you want to mess with." Brian laughed and shook his head. "The law? That's ridiculous. I'm a cop. I am the law. And if you think you can do anything to me, go ahead." The atmosphere in the supermarket became tense. The confrontation between Rachel Taylor and Officer Brian Ford was no longer a simple argument, it had drawn the attention of everyone. Some customers stood back, quietly recording the scene on their phones. Brian, his face angry and his ego inflated, crossed his arms and stared at Rachel. She stood calm and unflinching, her gaze sharp and authoritative. She knew she was dealing with a man who was not only irresponsible but also arrogant and extreme. "You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you?" Brian sneered. Rachel replied calmly but firmly. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, an irresponsible, rude police officer completely unworthy of the uniform he wears." Brian laughed loudly as if her words were a joke. He pointed at her, his voice rising. "Look, I don't need a black woman telling me how to do my job. Who do you think you are? Someone special? I suggest you leave before I make things worse." Rachel stared at him, unwavering. She took a step closer, her voice low but full of authority. "I tried to remind you politely, but if you continue to use offensive language, you won't just face me, you'll answer to the law. I am not just an ordinary woman. I am a high-ranking military officer who has devoted my life to protecting this country, and I will not hesitate to use my authority to deal with people like you." Her confidence shocked some of the people nearby, but Brian didn't believe it. He laughed louder, dripping with sarcasm. "Military officer? You're joking, right? Someone like you shouldn't be in that position. You're just pretending to be powerful to hide your weakness." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She crossed her arms and looked at him coldly. She was used to suspicious looks and sarcasm. As a black woman in the military, she had faced discrimination all her life, but that only made her stronger. "I'm warning you one last time, Brian. Stop now, or you'll pay for your actions." But Brian didn't stop. He stepped closer, his voice filled with threat. "You think you can scare me? Let me tell you, women like you should know their place. Don't act so high and mighty in front of me." The crowd gasped. Some stepped back, sensing danger. Then, in a fit of rage and arrogance, Brian pulled his gun and pointed it at Rachel. "I warn you for the last time. Get out of here. Now out." The supermarket fell silent. Some screamed and ran. Others froze. Brian stood there, the gun in his hand, shaking slightly, but his eyes showed defiance. Rachel didn't flinch. Even with a gun pointed at her, she stood tall. She had faced worse on the battlefield. A man like Brian couldn't shake her. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she said, her voice low but powerful. She pulled out her phone and calmly dialed a number. A voice answered. Rachel spoke briefly. "Mayor, I need you to come to the supermarket immediately. There is a very serious matter that needs to be dealt with." Brian looked stunned. He lowered the gun slightly. "Mayor? Who do you think you are? Calling the mayor? Are you kidding me?" Rachel didn't respond. She put her phone away, her eyes never leaving Brian. The crowd murmured. Some called the police. Others kept filming. Brian began to realize he had lost control. But instead of stepping back, he shouted again. "Everyone stand still. And no one leaves until I finish speaking." He didn't expect that his actions would only make things worse. Rachel looked at him, eyes sharp. "You just made a big mistake, Brian, and I'll make sure you pay the consequences." The entire supermarket held its breath, waiting for something to happen. A vague anxiety began to form in Brian's mind, but he was still unaware that things had already spiraled out of control. Rachel, calm and composed like a veteran, knew she would not let this go without justice. A car horn sounded outside, breaking the heavy silence. All eyes turned to the door, where a black luxury car with the mayor's office insignia came to a stop. The door opened, and a tall, middle-aged man with an authoritative presence stepped out. It was Mayor Darius Cole, known for his fairness and deep respect for those who serve the country. As the mayor entered, the atmosphere in the supermarket shifted. Curious and surprised eyes followed his every move. Rachel straightened her back and met the mayor's gaze. A fleeting moment of understanding passed between them. Brian Ford, still holding the gun, turned his head at the sight of the mayor. His expression changed from surprise to confusion. He lowered the gun slightly but kept his defiant stance. "Mayor Cole, what are you doing here?" he stammered, his voice uncertain. The mayor didn't respond immediately. He approached, glanced at Brian, and stopped in front of Rachel. With a nod and a calm tone, he said, "Colonel Taylor, are you okay?" The crowd gasped. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Colonel Taylor?" No one had expected the woman in civilian clothes to be a high-ranking military officer. "I'm fine, Mayor," Rachel replied, her voice steady. "But I can't say the same about the situation here." Mayor Cole turned to Brian. his gaze sharp and commanding. He looked at the gun still in Brian's hand, then stared directly at him. "Brian Ford, I just received a call from Colonel Rachel Taylor, a woman I greatly respect. She informed me that you abused your authority, insulted her, and even threatened her with a weapon. I want to hear your side right now." Brian began to panic. Sweat formed on his brow. He stammered, "Sir, this is just a misunderstanding. She caused trouble. I was only trying to maintain order." The mayor narrowed his eyes, unconvinced. "You there," he said, pointing to a young woman in the crowd. "I saw you recording. May I see the video?" Trembling, the woman stepped forward and handed her phone to the mayor. He watched the footage carefully, every word, every action captured clearly, from Brian's racist insults to him drawing his weapon on Rachel. Mayor Cole's expression darkened. He turned to Brian. "Do you think you can use your position as a police officer to threaten an innocent citizen, let alone a colonel in the military? You didn't just abuse your authority. You insulted someone who's devoted her life to protecting this country. Do you understand how serious that is?" Brian had no answer. His head lowered as he mumbled weak excuses no one believed. The mayor signaled to two police officers who had just arrived. "Disarm him. Take him into custody. He is suspended effective immediately, pending a full investigation." Two officers stepped forward and took Brian's weapon. He screamed and struggled. "No, this is wrong. I'm a police officer. You can't do this to me." But his protests were meaningless. The crowd watched in silence as he was escorted out, their eyes filled with relief and quiet satisfaction. As Brian was taken away, the mayor turned back to Rachel, his expression softening. "Rachel Taylor," he said, "I apologize on behalf of the city for the actions of this police officer. This is a great shame for our entire police force." Rachel nodded, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you, Mayor. I just don't want anyone else to go through what I just went through. Our system needs responsible and fair people, not abusers of power." The mayor agreed, promising he would personally oversee the matter. As Rachel walked out of the supermarket, the crowd lining the aisles applauded and thanked her. A few stepped forward to apologize for not intervening earlier. Rachel simply smiled, knowing the lesson today was not just for Brian Ford, but for everyone who had witnessed the event. The story of Rachel Taylor and Officer Brian Ford quickly went viral on social media. The video recording the incident became the center of attention, attracting millions of views and thousands of comments. The public strongly condemned Brian's behavior while expressing deep respect and admiration for Rachel's courage. Days later, Brian Ford was officially fired from the police force, and a wide-ranging investigation was launched to improve accountability and workplace culture within the department. Meanwhile, Rachel Taylor continued her work, unaffected by the sudden fame. She knew that in the fight for justice, everyone must do their part, no matter the challenge, no matter the cost. Weeks after the supermarket incident, the name Rachel Taylor was no longer just part of a viral video. She had become a symbol of courage, dignity, and moral strength in the face of abuse and injustice. News outlets, civil rights organizations, and community leaders spoke of her not as a victim, but as a leader who stood firm when it mattered most. Universities, military academies, and even police training programs began inviting Rachel to speak. Every time she took the stage, she didn't need to shout or condemn. With calm composure and steady conviction, she told her story. And every time, the room went silent, then erupted into applause. She didn't speak to shame, but to awaken. She reminded audiences that power means nothing without responsibility, and that every small act of justice can ripple into great change. Months later, real reforms began taking place. The police department where Brian had once worked launched a full overhaul of its training curriculum. Officers were now required to undergo civil rights education, de-escalation training, and annual community accountability reviews. Oversight boards were created with local citizens, including women and people of color, playing key roles. Rachel's story found its way into classrooms, civic meetings, and public campaigns. Her image, calm, steady, unshaken, was printed on posters used in workshops and town halls. A reminder that bravery isn't about confrontation. It's about standing tall for what's right. Several people who had witnessed the event later returned to find her. One woman, who had stood nearby when Brian pulled his gun, came to Rachel with tears in her eyes and said, "That day, I was too afraid to speak up. But today, because of you, I've joined my local oversight board. I want to help make sure that never happens again." Rachel, however, remained the same. She did not seek fame or attention. She continued to serve quietly, with the same discipline that had guided her through battlefields. Only now, she was fighting for justice in her own community. The story of Rachel Taylor did not end in that supermarket. It lived on in new policies and inspired citizens, and in every young person who heard what she had done and believed that they too could make a difference. Justice, Rachel knew, is not a moment, it is a responsibility, a constant effort, and a choice made again and again, even when it's hard. And so, in the years to come, whenever people speak of courage, not just in war, but in everyday life, when they remember the quiet strength it takes to stand up to injustice, even when it comes from a gun pointed in your face, they remember the woman who refused to back down, the woman who stood alone until the world stood with her. This story leaves each person with their own emotions, but perhaps the clearest message is silence is never the answer. Injustice doesn't disappear just because we turn away. And those who choose to speak up even when alone are the lights that guide society forward. It also poses a powerful question to all of us. What would you do in that situation? Would you speak out or stay silent? Would you walk away or stay and take a stand? I hope you, the one reading this, will share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know how this story made you feel, because your voice might be the spark that inspires someone else to be braver tomorrow. To me, this story is a profound reminder. It made me realize that no matter who you are or what you do, if you don't use your voice for what's right, you're letting silence feed injustice. I believe that every time someone stands up, we move one step closer to a just society, and I hope you will be one of those who stand. Note: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.